All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are locked on Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman, and today you're getting my rapid reaction to the Falcons' 30-28 win over the Miami Dolphins in Week 7.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, been covering the Falcons for many years, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong. However, on Twitter, at FalcFans, contributing weekly content at the Falcoholic, the SB Nation website for the Atlanta Falcons, and of course, the host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, I'll be talking about Sunday's win over the Miami Dolphins, where the Falcons were able to prevail on a walk-off field goal from Younghoe Koo to win 30-28. And we'll start things off giving you the game summary, talking about the highs and the lows from the game in case you missed it or you just need a refresher. Then we'll be handing out my grades for the offense, the defense, and special teams in multiple phases for this Falcons team. And then I'll give you my final thoughts, and that will be basically focusing on whether, now that the Falcons are back to a 500 record for the first time really in 3 years, is this team poised to potentially make a playoff run later this season? And we'll get into that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons podcast. But before we get there, guys, I want to thank you all for making Locked On Falcons your first listen of the day. Of course, Locked On Falcons, like all Locked On Podcast Network shows, are free and available on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, and Spotify. And you, of course, can now find the Locked On Falcons podcast here on YouTube. And, of course, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Falcons here on YouTube. Make sure you leave a comment. Make sure you give us that like. Make sure you hit the bell icon so that you can see this handsome face smiling at you for the first time in a long time, coming off a Falcons win, moving forward every day, moving forward here on the YouTube platform. So with that being said, let's jump into this game summary. And looking at the first drive, the Dolphins offense looked like they were some unstoppable beasts because they were able to just basically march down the field, were able to convert multiple third downs. They had 4 third downs on that opening drive. 2 of them went to Jalen Waddle, where he beat Falcons nickel cornerback Chris Williamson, who got the start today at the nickel cornerback spot. But due to, I think, the struggles he had on that opening drive covering Jalen Waddle, I think the Falcons gave him the hook, and Richie Grant got the majority of the reps thereafter. The Dolphins had another third down conversion to Mike Gesicki, and their fourth one came on the scoring play to Isaiah Ford on a rub route, and that gave Miami a 7-0 lead. And Tua Tagovailoa looked very sharp on an opening drive. I think he completed 7 of 8 passes for 52 yards, including that touchdown. And so clearly he was able to block out all the trade rumors surrounding him this week and get off to a fast start for this Dolphins offense. And the Falcons didn't particularly respond well, having a 3-and-out of their own on their ensuing possession, but the defense did play better on the next Dolphins possession, forcing a 3-and-out of their own. And then on the Falcons' second offensive possession, things started out very well. Matt Ryan hitting tight end Kyle Pitts on a skinny post for a 23-yard gain. And then on the subsequent 3rd and 3, the Falcons handed the ball off to Mike Davis. And despite Jalen Mayfield whiffing on his block, Mike Davis did the thing that we've seen him do quite a bit this year, bounce off a tackle and still manage to convert on that 3rd and 3, showing that trademark ability to get yards after contact. Then you had that followed up by a nice 13-yard run from Cordero Patterson a few plays later. But then the drive got stymied when Dolphins rookie safety Javon Harlan blew past Jason Spriggs, who was starting at right tackle, and Davis, who was staying in for pass protection, to get a sack on Matt Ryan, costing the Falcons 11 yards as the first quarter came to a close, and the Falcons were essentially forced to settle for a 33-yard field goal from Younghoe Koo to get on the scoreboard down 7-3. The Falcons secondary started to step up on the next Dolphins drive with AJ Terrell having a nice pass breakup. And then there was another breakup by Fabian Moreau on a lob throw to tight end Mike Gesicki. There was a lot of contact on that play, but fortunately, really for the first time in a couple of weeks now, the refs decided to let Fabian Moreau play. Leave it on the field, and they did not throw a flag on that play. And the Dolphins were forced to settle for a long 49-yard field goal thereafter, but weren't able to convert because Ade Ogundeji and his 49-inch arms, or whatever they are, they're probably like 36 inches, but the ridiculously long wingspan that Ade Ogundeji has, that's only dwarfed by Kyle Pitts, showed up on that field goal, and he was able to block the kick. The Falcons were able to, move the ball down the field on their subsequent drive. Russell Gage got a nice conversion on 3rd and 9. Then you started seeing Matt Ryan distribute it to his secondary playmakers, guys like Keith Smith and Olamide Zaccheaus, and Hayden Hurst had some nice grabs, and the Hurst catch got the Falcons into the red zone. And then on an ensuing 3rd and 3 from the Dolphins 5, Matt Ryan on a rollout find and open Calvin Ridley over the middle, who scored on a 5-yard touchdown. And that was Ridley's second touchdown of the season. It was a nice sort of comeback moment for him this week. Would be the best moment of his game. We'll talk about some of the issues that he went through later in today's episode. But, it was a nice comeback for Calvin Ridley, who missed that London game in week 5. And Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, termed it this morning, or Sunday morning, as a mental health break. And so, it was nice to see Calvin Ridley come back this afternoon and get that score. And the Falcons took the lead 10-7 with 5 minutes to go in the second quarter. The Dolphins then got the ball, started moving the ball down the field. Richie Grant got a nice run stuff on a play, and then 3 plays later, Tua tried to make a throw to tight end Durham Smythe in the end zone, but kind of overthrew the ball, and Jalen Hawkins was there to, make the read and pick off the pass. And the Falcons had a nice turnover in the red zone. So the Dolphins ended up with no points on that drive. And the Falcons, got the ball back with 36 seconds left in the first half, wasted no time, able to get a big play to Kyle Pitts down the sideline for 39 yards. Matt Ryan put the ball in a perfect spot. Kyle Pitts was able to reach out and snag it with one arm. And it was a great play on both the quarterback and pass catcher's part. And that really got the Falcons in prime scoring position. Matt Ryan then connected on 4 quick throws, and Koo was out there to kick a 36-yarder to give the Falcons a 13-7 halftime lead. Then the Falcons got the ball back at the start of the second half, and then you saw them continue to push the ball down the field, connecting with Pitts for 26 yards on the opening play of the second half. Then 2 plays later, Matt Ryan connected with another deep ball on a 49-yard bomb to Russell Gage on another sort of blown coverage from the defense. But, we'll take advantage of all of those that we get this year. Every big play that the Falcons can get. And so that was a 49-yard touchdown throw to Russell Gage. And again, Russell Gage having a nice comeback game after missing basically the last 4 weeks due to an ankle injury, and making that big play to give the Falcons a big lead. Then later in the third quarter, the Dolphins were able to get their act together, putting together an impressive 9-play scoring drive, capped off with a 6-yard touchdown lob to tight end Mike Gesicki. He was able to essentially use his 6'6" frame to Moss, Falcons rookie safety Richie Grant, in the end zone, and that cut the Falcons lead to 20-14 with about 5 minutes left in the third quarter. Both teams failed to do much on their next possessions as we got to the start of the fourth quarter, and the Dolphins punted, and it nearly ended in disaster for the Falcons because Olamide Zaccheaus, who was subbing in for an injured Avery Williams at the punt returner spot, and Williams was ruled out on Saturday with a hamstring injury, nearly touched the ball as it rolled through his legs, and it almost resulted in a turnover for the Falcons. But unfortunately, even though they got that break, they still got a turnover on the subsequent drive because Matt Ryan's pass to Calvin Ridley over the middle, Ridley wasn't able to secure the ball against his body, and Xavier Howard was able to basically steal it away from him in the air. Dolphins had prime field position right there at Atlanta's 32-yard line. But fortunately for the Falcons, Grady Jarrett showed up, got some pressure on Tua Tagovailoa, and he made an errant pass over the middle, throwing late, and Foye Oluokun was there to snatch it and sprinted 56 yards down the field to help set up a Falcons score. The Falcons quickly capitalized on a 3-yard scoring run by Cordero Patterson, and now had a 27-14 lead with 13 minutes left in the game. And so everything seemed good, but it's the Falcons, so of course they're going to let the team back in. And Miami didn't go quietly. Tua responded. He connected on his first three passes on the next drive to tight ends Durham Smythe and Mike Gesicki for a combined 54 yards to get into Falcons territory. Then several plays later on a 3rd and 6 at the Falcons 16, he was scrambling, rolled off a tackle by Eric Harris, who wound up being injured with a shoulder injury on that particular play, and that led to a conversion. And then the next play, Tua hit Myles Gaskin on a check down, and he made backup cornerback TJ Green miss in the open field on a score there. And TJ Green was in the game because AJ Terrell had been subbed out of the game with a neck injury earlier. And so, Green missed that tackle, and it was a 7-yard touchdown. And now the Dolphins have cut the lead 27-21 with 8.5 minutes left. And then the Falcons got backed up on their own drive due to a penalty on special teams. But they were starting to move the ball. But then on a 3rd and 8, as they got closer to midfield, Matt Ryan was forced to scramble due to nobody getting open, and then got sacked, or not sacked, but stripped from behind from Emmanuel Ogbah. Dolphins cornerback Nick Needham recovered the loose ball, and the Dolphins took over near midfield. Things seemed to still be going the Falcons' way because the Dolphins has a couple of costly penalties to start that drive, but eventually they were able to get that yardage back. And even though they faced a 3rd and 15 later in that drive, the Dolphins were able to find an open Mike Gesicki over the middle on a blown coverage by the Falcons. It looked like Foye Oluokun was the guy that blew the coverage on that particular play, leaving Gesicki wide open. And then 2 plays later, Tua found Mac Hollins in the back of the end zone on a 4-yard score, and now Miami had a 28-27 lead with 2 minutes and 27 seconds left in the game. But of course, there's no panic in the Falcons. They've been blowing leads before. By now, you would think they're used to it at this point in time, and it looked like they were like, okay, this is part of our process. We'll get the result that we need, and the Falcons got aggressive, hit Kyle Pitts over the middle on a 23-yard gain and start that drive just before the 2-minute warning. Then they threw another floor to Kyle Pitts on a fade ball, and Matt Ryan showed some great touch on that ball to get a 28-yard gain along the sideline. And the Falcons were basically in prime scoring position, and then just ran out the clock, forced the Dolphins to use their subsequent timeouts, gained a couple of yards to get Koo into makeable field goal range. And it was like, okay, Koo's coming out with a couple of seconds left, 31-yard field goal. This is a gimme. Then, of course, Josh Andrews got a false start. And so if you were nervous at that point in time, that didn't help, calm your nerves. But of course, Younghoe Koo did his thing. Good snap, good hold on the 36-yarder, and hit it right down the middle for the walk-off game winner, his second game winner of the season. The Falcons had a 30-28 victory. And we'll continue today's Locked On Falcons talking about the grades that the offense, defense, and special teams deserve. But before we get into this, does this sound familiar? You got that one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, and you're watching sports highlights on your phone. And then you've got your father's, brothers, nephews, cousins, former roommate Deborah's login for your preferred streaming service. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way that you can get all the entertainment that you love without any of the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no need to buy a device ever again. And the best part, besides not having to borrow Deborah's login, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. So when we're giving out grades for this Falcons team, we're focusing on the pass offense, the rush offense, the pass defense, the rush defense, and special teams. So starting with the pass offense, I give them an A. Probably Matt Ryan's best game to date this year. He was, pushing the ball down the field. And for once, he wasn't underthrowing guys, right? He was throwing with great touch, great accuracy on several of those deep balls. I believe he was 5 for 8 on throws that traveled more than 15 yards in the air in this game, which was by far his best completion percentage. I think the best game prior to this, he was maybe like 3 for 8, 3 for 9 or something like that on such deeper throws. So basically the only reason I didn't give the team an A+ in terms of their pass offense was the turnovers and a relatively slower second half for Matt Ryan. The interception to Ridley was basically a drop pass by Ridley, so that's not on Matt Ryan. The second one was just poor ball security by Ryan on that particular play. And I'm glad that the Falcons were able to close out this game because I didn't want to necessarily hear all the backlash from hearing about Matt Ryan playing a pretty good game, but then turning the ball over at the end. But fortunately, the Falcons were able to close things out. Through that opening drive in the third quarter, Ryan had complete like 82% of his passes on 22 attempts for 241 yards, had 2 touchdowns. At that point, had 143 passer rating and an adjusted net yards per attempt of nearly 12, 11.7. But thereafter, after that opening drive in the third quarter, he only completed 39% of his 18 passes for 95 yards and a passer rating of 33 with an adjusted net yards per attempt of 2.8. And so one of the things I do want to go back and watch the film is to see what the Dolphins did after that opening drive in the third quarter to really stymie Ryan in the offense after that Russell Gage long touchdown. And I know some of that is probably owed to the pressure and pass breakups by the Dolphins. I know the Dolphins finished this game officially with 6 quarterback hits and 7 pass breakups. And 3 of those hits and 6 of those pass breakups did come after that Russell Gage touchdown. So it did seem like the defensive players maybe were playing a little bit more physical, and that was able to slow down this Falcons offense. But that's definitely something I want to go back and watch the film of. Kyle Pitts was once again spectacular. He finished the game with 7 catches for 163 yards, a career high for him. 6 explosive plays for the Falcons offense overall, 20+ yard gains, and 5 of them came from Kyle Pitts. Outside of Pitts, though, it was a fairly quiet game for the other Falcons main receivers. Calvin Ridley, outside of his 11-yard touchdown, he finished the game with 4 catches on 10 targets for only 26 yards. And we still continue to see the Falcons trying to make him, a middle of the field receiver, running a lot of crossing routes for him. There was one where he got absolutely obliterated over the middle and led to a incompletion because the defender was able to separate the ball from the receiver in that play. And then you also had the interception, was also a crossing route. Russell Gage had a solid comeback game with his 49-yard catch and a couple of key conversions as well. So he wound up with 4 catches on the day. The offensive line did a decent enough job. Be curious to see how much pressure they gave up, given that they did give up 6 hits, and to see what additional beyond that they gave up. But we also knew that going into the game, the right tackle position was going to be concerned with Jason Spriggs starting in for Kaleb McGary, who was out of the game with COVID. And I thought for the most part, Jason Spriggs held his own. I wouldn't, when I keyed on him, I wasn't necessarily blown away with his performance. He had some good things, he had some bad things, but for the most part, he wasn't breaking the Falcons offense. So that will be interesting to go back and watch the film. The player that stood out the most in terms of negative plays in this game was Jalen Mayfield to me watching the game. But again, that's something I'll go back and focus on when I watch the All 22 later this week. Moving on to the rushing offense, C+ for me. The running game didn't really do a whole lot. Patterson got the bulk of the carries. I'm not quite sure why. I know Mike Davis exited the game. He was seen limping off the field on the final possession. But prior to that, he didn't get much of a workload, and I don't know exactly what the mechanism for that was. Patterson, got 14 carries, was generally efficient in this game, had a success rate of 43% on 14 carries for 60 yards in that touchdown. Davis only had 4 carries and his only successful run was that 3rd and 3 conversion that he had early in the game. Overall, the Falcons running game was successful on 37% of their 19 design runs. Ideally, you want that success rate to be in the mid 40s or higher to be qualified as a good day rushing. But the fact that the Falcons were able to convert on all 4 of their instances where they had relatively short yardage to go with 3 yards or less, was enough to bump them to a C+ for me with my grade. Moving on to the pass defense, a C-. Things didn't look great for the Falcons defense starting out the game, given how Tua was able to carve them up. Thereafter, Tua was still able to complete a high degree of passes, in large part due to Miami dinking and dunking quite a bit. A lot of the stuff was funneled through the tight end position, and so that remains a concern for this pass defense. Can they really slow down tight end positions? Gesicki, Durham Smythe, and Adam Shaheen combined for 14 catches for 145 yards and a touchdown. So it did seem like the Falcons were, sort of giving up a lot over the middle, given some of the softer zones that they looked like they were employing quite a bit in this game. Later in the fourth quarter, when Miami started to push the ball down a little bit more down the field, it didn't seem like the Falcons really slowed them down in any major way, where Miami was trying to, score late in the game to get back in the game, and were able to eventually do that. And it didn't seem like the Falcons did much to really stop them. I'll be curious to go back and look at how much pressure Tua was under. It did seem like the Falcons were successful at moving him off his spot a number of times, but it didn't seem like he was really under that much pressure when that happened, where he couldn't, extend the plays outside the pocket or step up in the pocket and slide away from pressure and still deliver some catchable passes outside of a handful of instances. So I'll be curious to see where the Falcons' pressure was. It did seem like as the game wore on, the Falcons realized that they weren't getting enough pressure, particularly after that first drive, and started to dial up a little bit more blitzes in those sort of critical down situations like third downs. And that seemed to work a little bit better for them, but probably explains why Tua was so efficient at completing passes, because the blitz is kind of a live by the sword, die by the sword type of scenario. Of the guys up front in terms of making impact plays as pass rushers, Grady Jarrett was the only person that stood out to me live. He had a couple of times where he was able to win his matchup up front, including that Oluokun interception with Dante Fowler on the injured reserve. Didn't really see a whole lot from the other edges that really stood out in this game. Stephen Means and Ade Ogundeji were pretty quiet from my eyes. I don't even really remember seeing Jacob Tuioti Manor out there on the field. I saw one snap where James Valters was out on the field. So not a whole lot from the edges that really sort of filled the shoes of Fowler, but we'll see what the film says if it says otherwise. Injuries were also a factor for the Falcons pass defense, particularly, and that may explain some of the reasons why things did not look great for them late in the game, because they started to, attrition started to be an issue. AJ Terrell exited the game with a neck injury, as I mentioned earlier. Initially he was evaluated for a concussion earlier in the game, then re-entered the game, then exited it later. And this seems like a frequent occurrence with this Falcons training staff, where they will clear a guy to re-enter a game and then he'll aggravate whatever that injury is. And, hopefully it's not a big deal with Terrell, but, when we saw it happen with Russell Gage in that week 2 game where he injured his ankle early, stayed in the game, even though it was clearly bothering him, and then basically missed a month of the season. And then you kind of look at the Dante Fowler situation, where in that Jets game in London, he exited the game early with a knee game, went back in with a knee brace, then exited again, and he missed this week of practice, and now he's on IR, so he's going to miss basically a month of the season. You hope that this is not the situation with AJ Terrell in his status moving forward. So we'll see what about that. Eric Harris exited the game at some point with a shoulder injury, and the sideline reports indicated he was trying to get back into the game. But fortunately, it seemed like the training staff was trying to prevent that from happening. Fabian Moreau also exited the game very late as well with an unknown injury. So we got to see probably a lot more Chris Williamson and TJ Green than we wanted to see. And it probably showed on why Miami was so successful moving the ball late against this defense, just because the coverage was not good. And we know that the pass rush was not necessarily doing a whole lot to cover up for that fact. So, in terms of the grade for the passing defense, I probably would have given them a C minus, but the 2 turnovers really bumped them up in that regard. So I give them a C plus. It was certainly a good enough performance to win in the end, but I think fortunately the Falcons were in a position where it was the offense that had to go out there and win the game for them, rather than the defense having to go out there and get a stop late. Because I'm not very confident that the defense would have been able to pull that off, given what we saw in the fourth quarter from this defense. So looking at the rush defense, a C minus for me there. The Dolphins were generally good at running the football. They had a success rate of 50% on 26 design runs. We've seen this Falcons run defense be soft all year long. With Marlon Davidson back in the lineup this week after missing a couple of games, we did see Mike Pennell get deactivated, the big beefy nose tackle that seemed like paid off in a positive way for the Falcons run defense in that London game. But Miami didn't necessarily dominate the game on the ground, but Falcons gave up 132 yards rushing, and there's no way that you can say that's a positive performance for the rushing defense. From my count, Deron Harmon led the team with 3 run stops. Richie Grant had 2. Deion Jones had the only tackle for loss on the day. And I thought this was probably one of the better games that Deion Jones had watching the game live, so I'll be curious to go back and see if that's true on the film. We started to see Deion Jones be that playmaker that has been sorely missing from this defense, running around the field and making a bunch of plays these last couple of years. So that was good for him. Special teams, we will give them a B. Younghoe Koo continues to be excellent. Dustin Colquitt had one iffy punt in this game, but for the most part, he was fine in this game. And his punt wasn't terrible or anything like that, but it was just like, it was a 38 yarder in the third quarter where you kind of wanted that to be more like a 50 yarder or something like that in that situation. But certainly an improved performance from what we saw from him in the London game. Zacchaeus had a nice 17-yard punt return in this game, but then that you could argue that got negated by then almost turnover that he had where the ball went through his legs on a bounce and nearly touched him. And, I certainly think you can make a case that it kind of did touch him. It probably only grazed him, so it wasn't enough to sort of challenge and get an overturned call or anything like that. But it was certainly touch and go there for a second where you thought, this is, the type of bad luck that the Falcons definitely can't afford to have given this game. So, when we look at Koo's kickoff ability, 4 out of his 6 kickoffs were touchbacks. So that's a very positive sign given some of the issues that he showed, kicking those long kicks in previous instances. So overall, nothing really special about the Falcon special teams other than Younghoe Koo's performance. And so that was why I gave it only a B. It's just like Koo was an A and everybody else was kind of just like a C level performance. So, clearly Younghoe Koo doesn't want to get traded. And of course, real ones recognize that reference. But why would you trade your kicker if your team is a playoff contender? And that's what we're going to discuss as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons rapid reaction. But before we get there, guys, I want to thank you everyone for making Locked On Falcons their first listen of the day. And of course, I want to highly recommend you guys to check out several other shows on the Locked On Podcast Network as your second listen of the day. And of course, you want to keep the good vibes going by checking out the MLB side of the Locked On Podcast Network, which includes your daily podcast on your favorite baseball team, including the Atlanta Braves. Check out the Locked On Braves podcast as the Braves are now headed to the World Series to face off against a bunch of cheaters. And the last time an Atlanta-based sports team went off to the city of Houston to play a team in a championship game that is known for having a reputation for cheating a bunch. It did not go in the Atlanta-based sports team's favor, but now it's redemption time. It's redeem season, right? And so the Braves have an opportunity to redeem that instance that will go nameless. We'll just sort of vaguely refer to it as we do here on Locked On Falcons. But go check out the Locked On Braves podcast. You can, of course, find it on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, and Spotify. So I know when you guys are in bumper to bumper traffic in Atlanta or wherever you call home, you burn through a ton of gas. Why not get some cash back so that you can save at the pump? And you now can with a new app called Getupside. When you open an account with Getupside, you get 25 cents back per gallon every time you fill up. Over time, that kind of savings starts to add up with people making as much as $200 to $300 a month. With Getupside, you not only save, but you also have multiple cash out options, including a direct payment into your bank account, PayPal. You can get gift cards for Amazon and other places and more available all the time. And now when you open an account and use our special promo code Touchdown, you can get a bonus 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. So that's up to 50 cents back per gallon. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Download the free Getupside app available in the App Store or on Google Play and use our promo code Touchdown when you sign up. That's Getupside promo code Touchdown to start saving every time you fill up. So when you scarf down a blueberry muffin, it's a great way to start your morning, but that could also involve eating close to 500 calories, 40 grams of sugar, and just getting 6 grams of protein to start your day. What if you could scarf down a blueberry muffin, get none of the guilt because you're only getting 140 calories, 6 grams of sugar, and you're tripling your protein with 17 grams? Well, it's not too good to be true, although sometimes when I eat a Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market, it does taste like it's too good to be true. But Built Bars come in a variety of delicious flavors. I'm a big fan of the coconut almond, but perhaps you prefer other flavors like salted caramel, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. There's something for everyone. You can also get occasional limited time flavors like the blueberry muffin, coconut marshmallow puff, rocky road, or cherry lime. Built Bars are great because they taste just like a candy bar containing 100% real chocolate. They're soft and easy to chew. My favorite, the coconut almond, tastes just like an almond joy, but you get none of the guilt of eating a candy bar because Built Bars are healthy too. They're low in sugar, low in calories, high in protein, high in fiber. Go order yourself some today at built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your first order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So we're wrapping up today's rapid reaction talking about the Falcons, being 500 for the first time, if you count not, 1-1 starts to their seasons, but basically after the first month of the season, this is the first time the Falcons have been 500 since they were 4-4 midway through that 2018 season. And, that was a team that started the season 1-4, got back to 500, and we thought, hey man, they're gonna get above 500 and we're back in the playoff chase going up against this Browns team on the road. And they of course completely laid an egg in that Browns game and continue to lay eggs for the next month of the season, losing 5 straight and wound up 4-9 and out of the playoff race. And that caused the team to make some major changes, particularly to the coaching staff after that 2018 season, and it all was downhill from there from Dan Quinn. I'm only, not taking you back down that dark memory lane for negativity's sake, but it is one of those things where it's like, I've seen this team, climb out of a slow start before, and then, hopefully Arthur Smith's regime will do a better job than Dan Quinn's regime the last time we saw that. But, I think this stretch of games coming up for the Falcons includes several winnable games for them. They have Carolina at home next week. Carolina's now lost 4 straight, including to the Giants 25-3 today on Sunday. And I believe Sam Darnold was benched in the fourth quarter. So they're going through a whole bunch of issues. And so that's an opportunity for the Falcons to get their 4th win of the season next week. We know that the Falcons haven't won a game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium since their blowout win over the Raiders last year. Since then, it's been 4 straight losses. And so it's a prime opportunity for them to break that streak and get a win, a true win at home in a true home game, not the London game. Doesn't count. So, the next chance after this Carolina game is going to be that week 11 Thursday night game against the Patriots, which is going to be one of the tougher games that they face over the next 4 or 5 weeks. But, if they beat Carolina next week, they'll be 4-3. And that's the first time they'll be 4-3 since 2017, AKA the last time the Falcons made the playoffs. When you look back, the last 3 times the Falcons have started the season 4-3, they made the playoffs. That was 2017, 2016, and 2011. The last time the Falcons started the season 3-4. So if they lose to Carolina next week, and made the playoffs was 1991. The last 2 times in 2018 and 2001, they failed to make the playoffs with a 3-4 start. So, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, next week's outcome determines whether this team is a playoff team, nor am I going to feel as compelled to proclaim this team, on the path to the playoffs. But I certainly think these next couple of weeks are a golden opportunity to start padding some wins going up against teams like the Panthers, Saints, and Jaguars. And, when someone asked me 2 weeks ago what I thought the Falcons' final record would be after that Jets win, and I basically said the 5 most winnable games they have are the Dolphins coming out of the bye. Then you have the Jaguars game later, the Lions game at the end of the season, and then you have 2 potential wins at least in the NFC South against Carolina, against New Orleans. And so if you sat there and said, okay, the Falcons, I thought they would win 5 more games potentially. 4 out of those 5 most winnable games are, starting with Miami, are over the next, 5 or 6 weeks. So I feel like the Falcons will be in prime position to potentially win some of those games if they can maintain this explosiveness that we saw on Sunday against Miami. And, anybody who's been listening to the podcast for a regular basis over the last several weeks and certainly earlier this week has heard me, wax poetically about the need for this team to be more explosive. And we saw that come to fruition on Sunday. We heard Matt Ryan mention during the course of the week that, the Falcons wanted to be more explosive and they were able to pull that off. But that's certainly going to be a factor over the next month because they're facing some tougher defenses. Their next 4 opponents, Carolina, New Orleans, Dallas, and New England, currently, at least going into this weekend, were ranked in the top 11 on Football Outsiders DVOA defensive rankings. And if you've been listening to this podcast recently, not only the last week, but over the last several years, that I think when you're facing good defenses, you have to generate explosive plays. You're just not going to be able to dink and dunk your way down the field against better defenses. And so these next couple of weeks, obviously we don't know how good some of these defenses are. Some of these defenses may be a little bit of a mirage. Carolina has certainly not played like they did those first 3 games of the season where they look like a top 5 defense. So we'll see if the Falcons can expose some of the weaknesses next week. But I'm very curious to see what the battle in the trenches is going to be in that Carolina matchup. We've seen this offensive line play much better these last couple of weeks. Including on Sunday, but that Carolina matchup features some unfavorable matchups. You got a big, beefy nose tackle in the middle with Derek Brown, and maybe that's a concern going up against Matt Hennessy. You got Brian Burns, who has consistently, terrorized Caleb McGarry. We'll see if Caleb McGarry's coming off of COVID, but whether it's Caleb McGarry or Jason Spriggs, that's not a favorable matchup. And Hassan Reddick has been very good for Carolina so far this year, and so that gives them another viable edge option opposite Brian Burns. So next week and then the week after that, where they face New Orleans, and we know historically speaking, we've seen the Saints defense dominate the Falcons when they've had weak offensive lines to the tune of 6-8 sacks in previous outings over the last couple of years. So these next 2 weeks are going to be another big test for this offensive line. I think they're certainly trending in the right direction, but they really need to sort of get over these Carolina and New Orleans size humps over these next 2 weeks before we can, or at least speaking for myself, I can start really having legit confidence in this unit moving forward. But, the good thing is that, what we've seen from the Falcons, not only today against Miami, as well as the last couple of weeks against the Jets and Washington, we're starting to see this offense look like the offense that we thought we were going to get with Arthur Smith and Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley going into the season. And so that's a positive thing. And so we'll just sort of see if that continues with the, supposed uptick in defensive competition. But it does seem like the Falcons are sort of getting in the stride. So, well, I'm not ready to necessarily declare this team a playoff contender just yet. They certainly have an opportunity to earn that distinction over the next couple of weeks with some wins, and stacking some wins so that we can go into December, really feeling like, okay, this team controls their own destiny. So we'll see how that goes, guys. And that will do it for us today on Locked On Falcons. Tomorrow we'll be joined by Josh Kendall of The Athletic to get his thoughts on this Falcons team and this Falcons win in week 7 against the Miami Dolphins. And of course, later this week, we'll get into the film on Wednesday, and that will be an opportunity for you guys to submit your questions. And of course, you can do so by hitting us up on Twitter at Locked On Falcons, on Facebook at Locked On Falcons, or you can send an email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com. And of course, guys, before we duck out of here, in addition to the Locked On Braves podcast, always got to plug my guy Brad Rowland on the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the NBA side of the Locked On Podcast Network, and of course the Peacock and Williamson podcast. If you want to catch up to all the things that happened over the weekend around the NFL, not just the Falcons, check out the Peacock and Williamson podcast, where NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson are giving you their insights and analysis to every team, every move, all the trade rumors involving these teams. There's rumors that Carolina is interested in Deshaun Watson, so we get 2 weeks of Deshaun Watson adjacent rumors surrounding the Falcons opponents. So get Matt and Brian's thoughts on those issues, as well as Sunday's outcomes and results, by finding the Peacock and Williamson podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Until then.